right, so we just got through talking about dialog windows. Now let's talk about the browser window itself. All right, so the browser window is accessed through what we call the window object. All right, so the window object in JavaScript we have execution environments, right? So JavaScript is, as we saw in client side JavaScript, we executed all our code via Node.js, right? So that was one execution environment. Now, in this scenario, in this course, we're executing our JavaScript through the browser. So the window object becomes our execution environment. And because JavaScript is object oriented, remember our last few chapters of JavaScript, you should know all about objects now. The window object is an object at the top level of our execution context. All right, so everything that executes in JavaScript is executing via the window object at some point. All right, so the window object when we're dealing with the browser is always there, and we're interacting with it whether you realize it or not. All right, so just an example, let's say we defined a function at the top level of our code. All right, and we just had that function. That function is actually attached to the window object. So if I did this by calling the window object and saying dot do nothing, that would actually execute this function. So let's just put do nothing. All right, so let's see what happens. Let's refresh our page. And we see now that we're executing do nothing, right? Because I called the do nothing function via the window object. So all our functions are going to get attached to, at the top level that is, are going to get attached to the window object, all right? That is also true for any variables we define globally or at this top level. So for instance, if I had the variable right, that is actually attached to that object, right? So if I said alert window dot name, I should see Adrian. So let's just take this and let's we're going to define it here before we call it function. All right, now let's give it a run. There it is, Adrian. So that variable that I defined at the top level is actually attached to the window object. All right, so we don't actually access our variables and our functions via the window object. We can do that, we can do so implicitly. And one of the things we'll get to a little later on is we don't actually want to declare these functions and these variables global. So we'll look at some approaches such as namespaces and anonymous functions on how we can actually hide these things from the global scope, or i.e. the window object. Okay? Now, we can interact with the window object to do a lot of things. We can actually manipulate the window size and position using the window object. And even though we can, we tend to have a tendency not to do so. And this is just one of my opinions, is because I don't want to be obtrusive with my user. I don't want to impose my will on my user. I like them to make those sort of decisions. But that ability is available to us. So we could do things like window dot move to, all right, and we can give it a position. All right, let's just see what the effect of that is. So I'm gonna click OK. And actually that method is blocked in my browser, so just be aware that we can do that, but sometimes it's blocked in certain browsers. All right, also we can obtain information about the window for use in our program. So let's just say we wanted to know the height of the user's browser. So let's just go in here in this function. I'm going to start using functions. I can access the screen height via the screen attached to the window object. So doing that would give me the height. Actually, assign it to a variable. And let's say I wanted the width. All right. Notice all those properties that are popping up for me. Just as an example, let's say we want to know how many pixels are usable. I just want you to see the methods that are available. Notice that available height, available left, available top, color depth, height, pixel depth, width. So lots of things are available to us via the window and the screen object. All right, so let's just do an alert. I'm just going to do one. And you get the picture because I stored it in that variable. So let's see what our result is. There we go. Height is 1080. All right. So we can actually access screen properties via the screen object that's attached to the window object. So it's a very powerful feature. All right. So let's talk about how we create new windows, because a lot of times you'll want to create new windows to display additional information. All right, so we're not talking about dialogues here. We're talking about real browser windows that we can include HTML, CSS, etc., and that we have more control over as far as styling. All right, so how do we do that? We can invoke the open method that's attached to the window object. So let's just say I want to do a pop-up. In fact, let's create a new page. Let's save it. Real creative here. Somepage.html. All right. All right. So let's go in here and all right. Now we want to open that window. Let's just go in here and we're going to invoke the open function. So I'm going to assign it to a variable, and you'll see why in just a second. And I'm going to say window.open, and then I'm going to specify the page that I want to open. Now this can be a relative URL or an absolute, etc. All right. So let's see the effect of that. And notice that it is blocked. My browser blocks it. So let's see if we can unblock that. All right, let's refresh it. There it is. So notice the behavior. Now some windows are different. Notice the behavior was to actually open that page in a new tab in Chrome. So be aware that different browsers behave differently for that type of behavior. So it actually opened up in a different tab versus a new pop-up window. All right, or it could be blocked. All right, so be aware of that and the fact that we can actually check if that worked by using an if statement. So if the pop-up was blocked, it's going to actually be null. So I can actually check and see if it's null. All right, and since it's a window object, I actually call methods on it. So pop-up dot. Notice I have a slew of things that are available to me. All right, so I'm going to call close, and that window should open and close. And you won't see the net effect because it opened and closed very fast. All right. All right. The open method is actually available to take a second argument, right? And that second argument is the name for the window. So if you're going to use this open method, then you want to really give the window a good name, all right? And then it takes a third argument. So let's add that second one in here. Right? And now it also can take a optional third argument, which is a string representing any properties that we want to give it. All right. So let's just do this. All right. So let's give it a third value representing those properties. So we're going to set the height equal to 200 and the width equal to 200. All right, so we're adding some additional properties in here, okay? Hey, look at their pop-up over there. Let's run it. Let me close that page. All right, so this case, and I'll tell you that behavior is so unpredictable, it actually opened in a new window because I specified those attributes, and it opened at a height of 200 and a width of 200. All right. All right, so there's a supplement link that's going to give you some information on the different properties that are available to you for the windows, such as the height, left, location, which tells us whether the location bar is visible, menu bar, which we can hide or show, determine whether it's visible, resizable, which allows us to specify whether the browser window is resizable, scroll bar, so we can control that type, the status, the toolbar should be visible or not, top, width. So we got a lot of properties that we can use to manipulate the window object itself, all right? But the key that I want you to know is that the window object is that top level object, and things that are defined top level in our JavaScript code get attached to the window object. And that's important because when we start working with multiple scripts, we have to be very careful of that, or we could have collisions between the values or the variables that are defined in the different scripts. And we'll see some examples of that later on. Okay? Take care.